Well, good morning, Mount Gilead. Today is April 23rd, and I hope you guys are staying dry out there. It's kind of rainy this morning. If you don't know me, my name's Mike Bridgewater. I'm the operations director here at the church, and on Sundays prior to this new normal of doing church online, you would have most likely found me in the lobby wearing a Hawaiian shirt. So I know these daily messages have been encouraging and to me, and I hope that the one that I'm about to deliver will be an encouragement to you today. I'm going to do something just a little bit different. I'm going to talk about this picture, and this is a picture that I took a couple years ago when I was standing on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. And as you can see in this picture, this is the modern skyline of Jerusalem today. This is the Dome of the Rock. And the Dome of the Rock was built back in 690 AD, and it stands on top of Mount Moriah. Now, Mount Moriah is familiar to us because that is where Abraham built an altar and took his son Isaac, and he was going to sacrifice him there. But just before he was about to sacrifice him, an angel of the Lord showed up and stopped him. And this is also the spot where the second Jewish temple was built by Herod the Great in about 20 BC. This big wall here is the east gate of the today. There's the gate right there. It's filled in, and this real steep valley here is the western side of the Kidron Valley. And coming up here in the foreground, this hill that we're standing on is the Mount of Olives. And as you can see today, it is just a very large cemetery. And the day we were there, there's actually a burial taking place down here at the bottom. So what happened at the Mount of Olives? You know, if we had a time machine and could go back in time, I think the Mount of Olives would be a great place to go and set up during that last week of Jesus' life here on earth. Because if you would check his Facebook account back then, you would see that he checked in quite a few times at the Mount of Olives. The first starts with the triumphal entry. Jesus was over by Jericho, and that's where we hear the story of Zacchaeus. And after he talks to Zacchaeus, he heads up to Jerusalem coming in from the west side and stops at the Mount of Olives. And it's there where he tells his disciples, hey, I want you to go into town. You're going to find a donkey, a young colt. And that's where the triumphal entry starts. The second thing that happens on the Mount of Olives is Jesus teaches his disciples many things there. He talks to them in the evenings, and one of the things he tells them is that the city is going to be destroyed. And in fact, in 70 AD, the city of Jerusalem was leveled by the Romans, that not any of the stones would be left unturned. And today that's what we know happened, that the city was completely leveled, and the only stones that were left were the massive foundation stones of the temple, which you can't see in that picture, but are on the other side, and that's what's known today as the Wailing Wall. The third thing that happens on the Mount of Olives in Matthew 26 and also in Mark 14 is this is where Jesus predicts Peter's denial. And the fourth thing that happens on the Mount of Olives is Jesus goes there and he prays there often during that week. The text says that it was his custom to spend the nights on the Mount of Olives, and during the daytime he would travel into the temple and teach each day. Another thing that happened at the Mount of Olives is the betrayal and arrest. In John 18:1, we read that after the first Lord's Supper, he took his disciples across the brook Kidron. Now the brook of Kidron, this is the Kidron Valley here between the Mount of Olives and Jerusalem. And there's the Kidron Brook that runs down here, this little stream. And off the picture here is where the Garden of Gethsemane is located. And finally, one of the things that's often overlooked is the Mount of Olives is the location that Jesus used for his ascension. In the first chapter of Acts, we can read in verses 11 and 12 that after his ascension, a couple men dressed in robes, some angels, were talking to the apostles, and they said, "Men of Galilee, what are you doing standing around staring into heaven? This Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven." And then they returned from Jerusalem, from the mount called Olivet, which is near Jerusalem, a Sabbath day's journey away. So a Sabbath day's journey is about 2,000 cubits, and it's about 3/4 of a mile, 1,200 yards. And so they were standing there on the Mount of Olives when Jesus ascended into heaven. So I know that we're living in a time today when, and the foreseeable future, where we can't call up our travel agent or go to the airport and pack our suitcase and travel to Israel and actually visit the real Mount of Olives. However, we can look to Jesus' example here at all the times he was at the Mount of Olives and be creative. At home, we can find a way to make our own Mount of Olives. Here, make a quiet place to decompress, a place to find some peace and comfort in this world, a place to be alone in prayer with the Father. I hope this was informative and interesting, and I hope that you make the best of the rest of your day. Have a good day.